Just again, the agenda for this morning, if you have some questions, which I hope you do for Dean, as soon as Bill is done, what we're going to do is you're going to come up to a mic. There are two of them. And I'm going to ask some people who I know to ask a question to break the ice. But if you had specific questions for Dean or Bill, we're going to take about 30 or 45 minutes after Bill is done before we go to lunch to have that conversation. So I wanted to mention that to you. This is Bill's book, Life from the Top of Mind. I've read it. Dean has read it. It has made a tremendous impact on our lives. Dean, when he got this book, called me and said, "John, you have to read this book," which, you know how Dean talks. So at any rate, I read the book. It is fantastic, Life from the Top of Mind. And I wanted to just read one of the quotes from the back of the book in introducing Bill. First of all, Bill's obviously an author, psychologist, speaker extraordinaire, and he's going to really help us today. Life from the Top of Mind is one of those rare books that can change your life. From chapter to chapter, Dr. Crawford boils profound principles into practical steps for addressing daily challenges and living a life of purpose. What better person to have at this meeting? Dr. Bill Crawford.
Thank you. First, let's give Dean a hand. Was that special or what? Wow. You can see why he was the Vistage Speaker of the Year in 2015. And I've just recently become a Vistage Speaker in the last couple of years. And you got to jump through a bunch of hoops to become a Vistage Speaker. You just can't say, "Hey, I'm a speaker, hire me." You got to go you got to get ratings. And to become the Vistage Speaker of the Year, you got to be better than everybody else. So when someone called me and said, "Hey, Bill, the Vistage Speaker of the Year read your book and thinks that you are cooler than Stephen Covey," I went, "Oh." And that was a wonderful thing. And since then, we've really connected, and it's just the first time we've really done this thing together. So one of the things I want to do is build on what he said, because he gave you wonderful, wonderful information. I've heard that presentation, and Kim was just writing notes all through it as well. So I want to build on that. Okay, you're going to do this and do that and just take that away. All right, fine. So let me give you just a little information about me. I do have a PhD in counseling psychology from the University of Houston. I am a psychologist. But the way I like to look at this doctor stuff is I read all those books and took all those courses so you don't have to. My job is to take everything I've learned from my training, from my being on the planet over 65 years, from my being married twice, the second one going on 29 years, so I got it right the second time, raising two sons, 25, 22. Take all that, make it practical, meaningful, useful, something that you can use this afternoon, tonight, tomorrow, with your kids, with your spouse, with your employees, pretty much everywhere in your life. In order to do that, I'm going to encourage you to see this less as a lecture and more as a discussion. Oh, you're going to plug it back in. Okay, all right. And then it's wonderful when someone kind of comes and plays with us, you know, 'cause he's a nice guy and we have a wonderful relationship off stage. He's very good. Okay, so you're going to wait until, okay, all right, I'll do that. So see this less as a lecture, more as a discussion, which means if you have a thought or a comment or a question, so now I can take this and I can put it aside, all righty. If you have a comment, a thought, a question, feel free to jump in. Feel free to raise your hand, because I want this to be about real life. And you know more about your real life than I do. So as we're going through this material, feel free to ask. As you've heard, both Dean and I are going to be up here afterwards to take your questions. So if you just want to write it down and wait till then, that's fine. But feel free to jump in if you have a question. I have now had the pleasure of writing 7 books and doing 2 PBS specials that have been shown around the country. The first book and the first PBS special was called All Stressed Up and Nowhere to Go. I love that title. My wife came up with that title, by the way. I love that title. Obviously, it was on stress. And after that book and that PBS special, people came up to me and they said, "Bill, the things that stress me out are the difficult people I have to deal with." So I was asked to do another PBS special based on the success of that one, and I call it From Chaos to Calm, Dealing with Difficult People versus Them Dealing with You. I don't know if you ever deal with any difficult people whatsoever in your life. But I've taken all that material from those 2 books and those 2 PBS specials and put them into my 4th book, my first hardcover. Very proud of this, as John mentioned, Life from the Top of the Mind. This is a system, a framework, a philosophy that I've been working on over the last 27 years that is designed to be applied to all aspects of life. My 3rd book is called How to Get Kids to Do What You Want. Uses this material. I've got a seminar that I do at country clubs called Golf from the Top of the Mind that uses this material. I've got an ebook called How to Eat Anything You Want, Anytime You Want, and Never Gain Weight that uses this material. So it's my belief that the material we're going to be talking about today can be applied to all aspects of life. Now, one of the things I think it's important to recognize is that it's easy for us to be purposeful and effective when everything's going well. People are patting us on the back and telling us what wonderful people we are, giving us lots of money. I think the challenging times are when we're dealing with those situations that have triggered our stress in the past. So just to make sure that I make this about real life, in a moment what I want to do is get a list of some of those situations that have triggered your stress in the past so I can make sure I'm applying my material to your real life experience. And then I want to kind of expand the meaning of stress. You know, my first PBS special was on stress, but I did have one person come up to me afterward and said, well, Bill, I don't really get stressed, I get frustrated. Okay, let's just call all of that stress. Anger, frustration, resentment, feeling overwhelmed, worried, confused, anything that gets in the way of your clarity, confidence, creativity. I want to show you the science behind that, build on what Dean said, and then allow you to put our 2 systems together, which I think can be very, very powerful. No other audience in the world has ever had the ability to put my system in with Dean's and make it useful. So you guys are very, very special people. You can go out and hire yourselves out as consultants after this. All right, so I want to get this list. Now, you may be able to notice there's something weird about the list. What's weird about the list is neither writing nor spelling was required for my degree, which means that's about the best I can do. And if I try to keep writing, I'll misspell it. You won't be able to read it. I need some help. I need someone who'd be willing to come up here and just write some stuff on the flip chart. You don't have to make it up. All you got to do is write it down. And if you will come up here and help me, I will let you go to my website and choose any digital product as a thank you gift. Let's give this person a hand, ladies and gentlemen. Woohoo! She has saved the presentation. We would just be staring at each other. Now, I am going to do, by the way, what's your name?
Jan.
Jan. Hi, Jan.
Hi.
Let me have those, Jan. Thank you very much.
Sorry.
I know, I love to be in control. Have you noticed that? Both Dean and I love to be. There's going to be a reason I'm going to limit you to black, and I'm sorry about that. I know.
I like to do color.
I know you do, and I'm going to give you that opportunity later, but right now, I'm just going to limit you to black. So if you'll write down whatever they say, and you can write kind of big, because we only need about, 5 or 6 or 7 of them. Write down whatever they say. Feel free to add any of your own. Situations in the past that have triggered your stress. It could be what? That's a cue for you, the audience, to speak now. I don't. Yes. Conflict, if you would, Jan. Conflict. Great. What else? Just yell it out. Family, right. Could be spouses, could be kids, could be mother-in-laws. Good. What else? I'm sorry? The election, yes. Have you noticed, as Dean talked about, it's like, horrible things are going to happen if you don't vote for me. Yeah. The election. Great. What else? Sickness, yes. Have you noticed when your body isn't feeling too good, it's really hard to deal with all that stuff. Good. And money. I assume, sir, you mean lack of money, right? Because if anybody here has too much money, we could fix that right here, right now. We don't need a seminar for that. Good. What else? How about employees? Is that fair to say? Sometimes they can be a little tricky, employees. And maybe customers sometimes, right? Fair to say? If we could just get rid of the employees and the customers, we would... Oh, wait a minute. That's what it's all about. Good list. What else? How about, well, you guys ever, I don't know, do y'all deal with traffic much up here? A little bit? Okay, just go ahead and put that down. I'm from Houston, by the way, where traffic is a big thing. That's a pretty good list. Why don't you do this, Jan? Why don't you just write etc. down there? We'll use this as a sample list. If your particular person or situation isn't on this list, just imagine that they are, and this will work. So when we're dealing with conflict in family, kids and spouses, and the election and sickness and lack of money and employees and customers and lack of vision, thank you, Jan, and traffic and all the things we didn't have a chance to get to, deadlines, deadbeats, in-laws, outlaws, all that stuff, we get stressed. So if you'll write stress up there, Jan, we also feel what else? We get stressed and we get angry. Very good. If you would, angry. And anxious. Yeah, we get angry. We get anxious. Good. We get tired. Have you noticed how exhausting it can be? Dealing with this stuff all day long, over and over. We also get sick. Yes. So illness can be a trigger and illness can be a reaction, which if that happens both ways, you get really pretty bad. Good. What else? We also get frustrated. That's one that a lot of people talk about, frustrated. And confused. Have you noticed, especially when you're dealing with that difficult person, why are you being so difficult? I am trying to help you. Confused, good. What else? Yes. Shut down. Yeah, we just want to just escape, kind of go inside our shell. Have you noticed that when you go inside your shell, people just start banging on your shell? You know, I'm in my shell. Hello, let me know. And I tell you what, for time's sake, why don't you just write crazy down there, okay? Like, drives me crazy, and we'll let this list represent how we found ourselves reacting. Let's give Jan a hand. She did a great job. Yeah, Jan. Woo-hoo-hoo. Thank you, Jan. Jan, I'm going to recommend you to all my friends. You were so cool. Matter of fact, you could be Vanna. This could be a whole new career, Jan. We could go on the road, and this would be cool. Okay. So again, because I want this to be about real life, just imagine that this list represents any situation in the past that has triggered your stress, and let this represent any way we have found ourselves reacting to those situations. So again, dealing with conflict, family, kids, spouses, the election, sickness, lack of money, employees, customers, difficult people in general, lack of vision, traffic, and all the things we didn't have a chance to talk about. We get stressed, we get angry, we get anxious, we get tired, we get sick, we get frustrated, we get confused, we shut down, and we go crazy. I think we got real life handled pretty well, don't you? If we could kind of learn to deal with this in an hour or so, I think our time would be well spent. In order to do that, we have to understand that these two lists are related to each other chronologically. In other words, this happens first, and it triggers this reaction, right? Which would be bad enough if it stopped there, but have you noticed that it doesn't? Because when this situation triggers this reaction, have you noticed the situation seems to get worse? The traffic seems worse. The difficult people are more problematic. The family, the kids, the conflict, the lack of money, which triggers another reaction. Which, of course, makes it seem worse, which triggers another reaction. It makes it seem worse, and reaction and worse, reaction and worse, reaction and worse, reaction and worse, until something explodes. I call this the cycle of stress, frustration. Does this look familiar to anyone here in the room? Isn't this kind of what's happening? We find ourselves dealing with situations, and while this is very understandable, rather than it helping us solve the problem, it actually makes the problem seem worse, which triggers another reaction, and we and those around us find ourselves trapped in this cycle. So given that this is so common, what I think we need is an uncommon solution. Also, I think it's important to recognize that, we could also put resentful over here. Don't we kind of resent dealing with this stuff? There's a quote on resentment you might like that says, resentment is like taking poison and waiting for the other person to die. I love that quote. Because rather than helping us deal with it, it makes us worse. So here's the quote from Albert Einstein that I really love. And I think it's important to approach every situation from this perspective. Problems cannot be solved at the same level of awareness that created them. I like that because I think it speaks to why we and those around us, given that we're all leaders here, find ourselves trapped in a cycle. We may be trying to solve the problem at the same level of awareness that created it. In other words, when we see this as the problem, when we see stress as the problem, by the way, I'm going to call all of this stress, any reaction that gets in the way of our clarity, confidence, and creativity. And when we see this as the cause, or when we ever feel stress, we go over here, try to change the cause. Ever try to change family or customers? Have you noticed they often don't say thank you for sharing when you're trying to change them? Now, I'm not saying we can't be influential over here, but the idea of seeing stress as the problem and this as the cause will forever trap us in this cycle. So unlike most people who talk about stress, I see it from a different perspective. I believe it's actually a valuable signal. There's a quote I like to use in my book that says, stress is a signal something needs to change. Suffering is when we don't make the change. I like that because it begins to differentiate stress, anger, frustration, tired from what we're being made to feel by someone to just a valuable signal. Kind of like we're driving down the road, a little red light comes on our dashboard. That little red light isn't the problem, it's there on purpose. So one of the things I want to do is bring some new information about what's going on here, how we can break this cycle with ourselves and with those that we influence. My new information fits very nicely with Dean's because it talks about how the brain processes information. So I'm going to break it down into 3 parts. Dean talked about 2 parts. I'm going to add one more part, and I think it might be helpful as we put all this together. So basically, if you look at the lower part of the brain, that's actually called the brainstem. This is where our fight or flight responses are located. It's the part of the brain that regulates our muscle tension, heart rate, blood pressure, breathing, etc. Middle part of the brain, as Dean mentions, called the limbic system. This is where our emotions are triggered for the most part, but it's also the part of the brain that acts as a gatekeeper. Or in today's terminology, it acts as a scanner, a processor, and a router. It scans incoming data from our 5 senses, visual first, and then routes it either down to the brainstem or up to the upper 80% of the brain, the neocortex, where we have access to our clarity, confidence, creativity, interpersonal skills, problem-solving skills, compassion, all that purposeful ability to make a difference in our life and in the lives of others. So again, this is how it works. Data comes, whoops, wrong button. Data comes in from our 5 senses, and it is first scanned by the limbic system. If the limbic system doesn't see a problem, got a remote here in my hand, no problem, sends data on up to the neocortex, brainstem works in the background, regulating breathing, muscle tension, heart rate, blood pressure, everything's fine. But if the limbic system senses anything or anyone it doesn't like, anything or anyone it has determined to be a problem or a trigger or a stressor or a threat of any kind, or anything or anyone that is similar to any problem, trigger, stress, or threat we've ever experienced in the past, it sends the data immediately down to the brainstem, bypassing the neocortex. That's why when you tried to talk to someone and you tried to be rational with them and give them data and tell them some new information and they didn't get it, it's because they weren't in the part of the brain that could actually process data. They were in that reactive part of the brain. So when this happens, here's what goes on. The brainstem goes into fight or flight, muscle tension goes up, heart rate goes up, breathing goes weird, and we find ourselves in that fight or flight, strikeout, or withdrawal response. In the latest brain research, this is called downshifting because it happens so quickly. And again, what we need to know is that it bypasses the most intelligent, capable, purposeful part of who we are. Now, in a fight or flight situation, this is exactly what we want to happen. If someone's throwing something at your head and you catch it in your peripheral vision, you'll duck without thinking. If we had to think, wait a minute, something's throwing something at my, we would just get hit in the head. So it works wonderfully when we need to react without thinking. But notice, dealing with conflict and family and sickness and lack of money and employees, people and traffic, we need our best thinking here. We need our best tools here. We can't be stuck in that lower 20% of the brain. Now, what a lot of people don't know is this blood pressure, muscle tension, heart rate are actually driven by certain chemicals. These are chemical reactions in our brain and our body. For the most part, adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol. These chemicals manifest themselves as stress, frustration, anger, anxious, tired, sick, frustrated, confused, shut down. And when we try to deal with life from this perspective, life seems to get worse, except difficult people. They don't seem to get worse. They do get worse. Because without really meaning to, we become their trigger. We are driving them deeper into their resistant brain. When this happens, when situations seem to get worse or difficult people do get worse, the limbic system goes, whoa, more negative data, didn't mean for that to happen, sends it right back down to the brainstem. And now you can see how we find ourselves trapped in this cycle, trying to solve rather complex personal and interpersonal situations from this very limited, limiting part of the brain. Again, my hope is you're able to think back to conversations you may have had or times when you were confused or time when you really couldn't find the right answer. Notice how worried we could get about that. Notice how frustrating that can be. Now we know the science behind that. So, given that this is so common and this is so common, I've created a system that shows you how to actually shift from that lower 20% of the brain up into the neocortex and change the chemical makeup of your body from adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol to serotonin and endorphins, the chemicals that help us feel better and think clearer. And I call this system life from the top of the mind. It's what I get to go around the world teaching. It's what I'm looking forward to teaching to you today. Now, it is a three-part system. First thing I want to show you to do is how to shift. When you find yourself in this cycle, because it's not like this will never happen again, right? I mean, we're human beings. We're going to find ourselves feeling this. I want to give you a behavioral model that lets you shift from the brainstem to the neocortex, change the chemical makeup of your body. Then I want to show you how to stay there so you don't find yourself falling back down into that brainstem every time you find yourself dealing with a difficult situation. Then I want to show you how to engage other people so that they shift from their resistant brain to their receptive brain so they actually hear and understand what you're wanting them to know, especially when you use Dean's methods along with that. Now, most people say, Bill, if you'll just show me how to do number 3, I frankly don't need number 1 and number 2. And I get that. But here's the thing. You never want to tie your peace of mind to another person's state of mind. All right? Because there are going to be people that no matter what you do, you can use all of Dean's stuff and all of mine stuff, and they're going to be so frightened and so reactive, they're going to have trouble shifting to that top of the mind. Plus, you don't want their inability to shift to throw you into that brainstem. You never want to tie your peace of mind to another person's state of mind. Now, if I were going to do a TED Talk, and by the way, if any of you could work that out, that would be really cool. I'd appreciate that. This is the slide I would use, because this pretty much puts it all together. We got the triggers, deadlines, deadbeats, in-laws, outlaws, difficult people, all that stuff. We see how it goes through the limbic system, and if the limbic system interprets it a certain way, it throws it down in the brainstem. We get angry, frustrated, resentful based on the adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol. That creates a cycle. The problem here, because it's that limbic system, this middle part of the brain, that is determining whether we go to the brainstem or go to the neocortex. And the problem is this part of the brain is unconscious. We're not doing this on purpose. We just find ourselves reacting this way. There's a great quote from Carl Jung that I really love that says, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will control your life, but you will call it fate. And what we need to know, bottom line, is until we make the unconscious conscious, it will control our life. We do not want this unconscious part of the brain controlling our life. We want to be able to influence that kind of influence for ourselves and others. When we see other people stuck in the brainstem, we want to help them get out as well. So what we want to do is actually train that middle part of the brain to interpret life in such a way that it sends it up to the neocortex versus down to the brainstem. This is what this process is all about. So far, so good? Okay, cool. Feel free to jump in if you have questions. So the model that we're going to use first is one that I've created. I call it Clarity, Confidence, and Creativity, C cubed. I think that's good because I think we can look here and see there's not a lot of clarity, confidence, and creativity going on here. Plus, this is a developmental model. And by the way, for those of you who would like me to send you this PowerPoint presentation, all you got to do is email me, and I will be happy to do that. All you got to do is Google Bill Crawford, PhD. I'll come up on the first page, go to my website, email me, and say, hey, Bill, I want John Dane's presentation, and I'll be happy to send it to you. So this is the developmental model, which means we got to have clarity before we can access our confidence. If you ever find yourself having trouble having confidence in a particular situation, chances are there is a lack of clarity there. We've got to have clarity and confidence before we can access our creativity. And dealing with difficult situations, especially difficult people, creativity is going to be huge. So in terms of clarity, you are already clear about the problem. You know things about the problem that only about 5% of the people on the planet know. 95% of the people on the planet thinks this makes me this, and that will forever trap them in that cycle. You now know this is interpreted by a certain part of the brain in such a way that it triggers a certain chemical reaction, and that frustration, anger, resentment is all a chemical reaction in that lower brain. That's huge because I'm going to show you how to influence that process. In other words, we got to regain control. A lot of people like to regain control, especially when we feel out of control, but they try to control this so they won't feel this. That ties our peace of mind to another person's state of mind. It doesn't work. The first thing we've got to do in terms of regaining control is we have to have our neocortex, this upper 80% of the brain, regain control from the brainstem. Because when we're trapped in this cycle, the brainstem is in control. Now, the brainstem controls muscle tension. That's kind of hard to control. The brainstem controls blood pressure. That's kind of hard to control. The brainstem controls breathing. That is not hard to control. So that's why if you've ever done any yoga or meditation or stress management, breathing was probably part of the process. But most people don't know why they want you to breathe. The reason they want you to breathe is because when you breathe on purpose, I call it the 5x5 method, where you inhale for a count of 5 and you exhale for a count of 5. Some people call it the 4-4-4 method. Inhale for a count of 4, hold it for a count of 4, exhale for a count of 4. When you do it that way, you actually have this upper 80% of the brain, the neocortex, taking over a function, breathing, that is normally controlled by the lower 20% of the brain. So you literally have the neocortex regaining control from the brainstem. Now, when you're in this position, you actually can influence the muscle tension that's going on if you use the word relax on the exhale. So you inhale very slowly, exhale slowly, and use the word relax on the exhale. Let me show you what that feels like. Everybody take a really deep breath. Hold it, hold it, hold it, hold it, hold it. And exhale, say the word relax. Relax. Wouldn't it be great if every meeting started like that? Every difficult conversation started like that? See, what's important is we have just taken 2 steps that have this very powerful, purposeful, intelligent, loving, compassionate part of who we are now in control. These 2 steps deal very nicely with the physiological components of stress. Let's look at what I call the psychological aspects or components of stress. The first one is our tendency to ask BS questions. BS stands for brainstem, by the way. And maybe something else like, what is wrong with these people? Man, I am trying to help them. Or why do I always get behind the slowest person on the road? What is that? See, the problem is when we're asking brainstem questions, we engage the brainstem. And the brain will kind of attempt to answer any question we ask it. So when we're going, what is wrong with these people? Our brain goes, well, they're just stupid idiots. They never were very good. But that doesn't help, right? Or sometimes we'll say, man, why do I let them get to me? I shouldn't be reacting. I should be able to handle this better. What's wrong with me? And our brain goes, well, you're just a stupid idiot. That's all there is to it. In other words, we're asking questions that don't serve us. So here's what I suggest we do. Breathe. Use the word relax on the exhale. Need to do it slowly and purposefully. And then ask what I call a neocortex question. A neocortex question is a question that can only be answered by the upper 80% of the brain. My favorite neocortex question that I think can help us begin to break this cycle is that when I'm dealing with a difficult person or a difficult situation, are we defining who we are? Or are we being defined by the people in situations around us? Got to get clear about that. Because when we say, man, this conflict really stresses me out, my family really frustrates me, man, this lack of money is really hard to deal with. Whenever we say this makes us this, what we're saying is the difficult people and the difficult situations in our life have the power to define us or control us. And I don't know about you folks, but I don't want these people in these situations to have that kind of power in my life. Which means if we don't want them to have that kind of power, we got to be willing to take that on ourselves. So what does it mean to define us? See if you like this. I'm going to suggest that every thought, emotion, and action really defines who we are and who we are becoming. We're either a person that reacts to conflict with stress or reacts to conflict with clarity, confidence, and creativity. So what we want to get really clear is, okay, if every thought, emotion, and action defines who we are, let's make sure we are defining ourselves on purpose. So there's several parts of that that are really important. We are defining ourselves. We're not being defined by others on purpose. And you know, I love the fact that this is a leadership conference because I love talking with leaders because you are influential in other people's life, whether it's your organization or your family, you're influential. And I think what we need to recognize is when we're talking about defining who we are, we're not just talking about ourselves as individuals, we're talking about the organization, we're talking about the family because people are looking to us. Matter of fact, there's a concept that I encourage leaders to adopt. I used to call it the videotape concept, but nobody uses videotape anymore. So now I call it the training film concept. Here's what I suggest. That if you are a leader within your organization or your family, I suggest that we as leaders interact with everyone within our organization and in our family in a way that that interaction could be videotaped and used as a training film for how we want them to interact with everyone else in our organization and family and everyone outside our organization and family. Now, we're all human beings, right? So I'm sure we can all think back to a time going, boy, I'm glad that one wasn't on videotape. But here's the thing. Now almost everybody on the planet has a camera phone. So you may be being videotaped whether you know it or not. But even if you're not being videotaped literally, you're being videotaped figuratively because you represent how powerful people in your organization and your family get things done. I did this for an organization in Cincinnati, and the leader of the organization really loved it. He went back to his family and said, family, I want to start interacting with you guys in a way that my interaction could be videotaped and used as a training film. Would you please point out to me if I'm not doing that? Now, of course, his kids went, sure will, Dad, you know. But boy, notice how open that was. Notice how vulnerable with that one. Notice what a commitment that is. Now, it doesn't mean we have to be perfect. If we make a mistake, we can show people how to learn from mistakes. It's just that idea of recognizing that if we are in a leadership position, if we're stepping into that position, either in our organization or our family or the world or the community, we have a responsibility to be purposeful in this process. Purposeful comes from the purposeful part of the brain. So we breathe, relax. On the exhale, make sure we had that neocortex in control. We ask a neocortex question. Here's my favorite neocortex question. If I were defining myself in a way I would recommend or teach to those in my organization, those in my family, that I would teach to my child and my children, what would that look like? Let me ask you that. This is where I need Jan again. Let's give Jan a hand. Yay, Jan! Thank you, Jan, for helping me out. You're a wonderful person. Don't let me forget to show you how to get your goodie at the end, okay? If you will write highest purpose right up here, and then write down whatever they say, thank you, on this side of the paper. So let me ask you, let's assume you're dealing with life in a way that defines who you are, in a way you would recommend to those in your organization and those in your family. What would be the qualities and characteristics you would like to be able to draw upon? Another way to ask that question is, dealing with difficult people, difficult situations, I would like to be more compassionate and patient. I heard two of those. So compassionate and patient. Excellent. What else? Thoughtful. Very nice. Compassionate, patient, and thoughtful. Very nice. And servant. Be a servant. There's a whole philosophy around that speaks to our helping and leading by serving others. Very powerful. You got one? What is that? Generous. Thank you very much. Yes, excellent. What else? I'm sorry? Clarity, clear, yes. Wonderful. And? Yes. I'm sorry? Sincere, very nice. Authentic. I used to be a drummer a long time ago. I think I blew out my hearing back then, so if I go A, it just helped me out there. Good. What? Yes. Understanding. Very nice. Good. Dealing with difficult people, difficult situations. I would like to be more empathetic and complimentary. Very nice. Empathetic, really understand where someone's coming from, and complimentary. Dean shows you how that's one of the C's that helps you get into that yes perspective. Excellent. What else? Yes. Wise. Ooh, very nice. It would be great if we could access all the wisdom that we've learned and bring it to bear on a situation. We got to know that all that wisdom resides up here. When we're down here, we don't have access to that wisdom. What else? Yes? Calm. Very nice. Calm. And just so we don't make Jan bend down too much, just write etc. at the very bottom there, and we'll use that as a sample list. Calm and peaceful, etc. Let's give Jan another hand. Yay, Jan! Thank you so much. Woohoo! Again, I'm going to recommend you to all my friends. You're just so good. Okay, so here's what you're saying. If we were dealing with life in a way that defined who we are, in a way that we would recommend to those around us, if we were walking around being videotaped in everything we did, and that videotape was used as a training film, we would like to be more compassionate, more patient, more thoughtful, a better servant, more generous, more clear, more sincere, authentic, more understanding, more empathetic, more complimentary, more wise, more calm, more peaceful, and we could have gone on and on. So let me ask you, how valuable would it be if after learning this material, you could react to this like this? That's my smoke and mirrors part of that. I had one person answer that question, how valuable would it be? I'll give you my firstborn, and I only have one child. That's how valuable this is. But notice what it would be like if we could access our best regardless of the situation, if we weren't trapped and triggered by those situations in the past. Now, does this take a little bit of time to get there? Sure. But a worthy goal, something you would teach to those you love? If so, what we've got to do is make sure we're coming from this upper 80% of the brain. So we breathe. Relax on the exhale. Anytime we need to regain control, ask this neocortex question, how do I want to define myself? If I were defining myself in a way I would recommend to those I love, those in my organization, what would it look like? Now here's the key. Because it's nice to have this list in mind, but here's the way to bring it to life. You got to know what it feels like to be compassionate and patient. You got to know what your behavior is, your tone of voice. Who are you when you are being this? You got to have that image in your mind. You got to imagine being that way. Now, a lot of people go, well, Bill, that's just your imagination. It's not real. But I'm going to suggest our imagination is very powerful. Let me show you what I mean. Everybody take your hand, hold it up to your mouth like this. I know it's weird, but it'll be meaningful. All right. Imagine you have in your hand a lemon. Got this lemon from the refrigerator. You can see the bumpy yellow rind of the outside of the lemon. Now we slice the lemon in half, and there's like lemon juice running down the side. You can see the shiny yellow pulp of the inside of the lemon. If you squeeze the lemon, juice squirts up. Now everybody take a big bite of your lemon. All right, you put your lemon down now. Do you notice what happens? Saliva, muscle. Some people are going, salt, margarita, help me out here. You know, some people taste lemon juice. That's up here. Now, here's something really important. There is no lemon. However, you have just changed the chemical makeup of your body. Anything that happened as a result of you imagining biting in the lemon, the saliva, the muscles, that was a chemical change in your body. You've just changed the chemical makeup of your body based not on what you held in your hand, but what you held in your mind and imagination. And you knew you weren't biting into a lemon, but your body reacted as if you were. And what that tells us is our body will react chemically to any image we hold in our mind, whether it's happening or not. So let's assume you're driving to work and somebody cuts you off on the freeway. Well, you have a limbic reaction. First, you pull back, and then you get pissed, and you go up in their bumper, and you go, bad driver, bad driver, bad driver. And then you get to work, and someone says, well, how was your commute? You said, you would not believe it. Some idiot almost killed me. And you tell the story. Then you go to lunch with someone else, and they say, well, how's your day? You said, I was driving to work. Some idiot almost took my front bumper off. And you tell the story. Now you're driving home, and you're looking for them because you're going to get them back, right? Where are these people? And you get home, and your wife says, how's your day? She says, I was driving to work, and some idiot almost killed me. See, we have just made that person someone we don't know and we'll probably never see again for the rest of our life, the most important person in our life. Because every time we tell that story, we dump that adrenaline, noradrenaline, and cortisol into our body. We have given that person the power to change the chemical makeup of our body, to control us. So we want to be very purposeful about the stories we tell, okay? We want to be very purposeful about the images we hold in our mind because they will trigger that chemical reaction in our body. That's how powerful our imagination is. So we breathe, relax, ask how I'd rather be feeling or how I want to define myself. Ask that neocortex question, imagine being that way. Then I'm going to encourage you to notice the change because at this step in the model, you will be feeling more calm, more confident, more in control because each one of these steps is neocortex in nature and each one of these steps is powerful. Plus the N helps me spell brain. As Dean mentioned, the model spells something. You would not believe how long it took me to make it spell brain, by the way, but okay. Now, a lot of people like this, but I did have one person that says, whoa, wait a minute, Bill. So you're saying this is what I should do if I'm ever about to lose it? I say, well, yeah. So she says, so if I'm in a meeting and I get really angry and I'm about to say something that I know is going to blow up the meeting, are you saying I'm supposed to go, wait a minute, I need to breathe and relax and ask how I'd rather be feeling? And I say, no. Sometimes you actually have to leave the meeting. She said, well, I can't leave the meeting. It's an important meeting. I said, really? Like you're trapped? She said, well, yeah, it's an important meeting. I can't just leave the meeting. And I said, well, I'm curious. What would you do if you had diarrhea? Not one person has said I would stay there and crap in my pants. Not one person has said that. Frankly, diarrhea is the most important thing in our life. We'll stop anything for diarrhea. We'll stop talking on the phone. We'll stop driving on the freeway, right? So I think the question is, how important is our peace of mind? How important is living from the top of the mind? I think it ought to be at least as important as, thank you very much. If you remember nothing from this seminar, I bet you remember that. So if you'll notice, I asked Jan to write this word up here, highest purpose. What if we made defining who we are in every situation our highest purpose? What if we made accessing this clear, confident, creative part of the brain before we dealt with situations, before we dealt with people? We got a real clear sense of how do I want to define myself? What are the qualities and characteristics I want to bring into this conversation? How do I want to deal with life? Now, it doesn't mean we'll always be successful, but notice how far ahead we'll be because we'll already be in this upper 80% of the brain. All right, so I told you this 3-step model. We've done the how to shift and how to stay. We shift by using the brain model. We stay for making it so important that we make it our highest purpose. I'm about to show you how to get other people to shift from that lower 20% to the upper 80%. But before I do that, let me stop. See what questions you have so far. What about what you've heard so far is either meaningful or helpful, or what questions do you have about this? You just guys want to go for the people, right? I understand. Yes. Okay. All right. We'll do that. Not a problem. Okay. So the whole idea of what I call the science of dealing with people from the top of the mind requires that we are actually in the top of the mind in order to deal with them. That can be challenging when we are dealing with these difficult people. If I were to ask you what were the adjectives you would use to describe the difficult people in your life, any ones you've ever dealt with before, what would you say? They can be what? Negative. Unreasonable. Stupid. And what else? Self-absorbed. Good. And one more. Demanding. Good. So have you noticed that when we're dealing, by the way, do you notice why we have Jan up here? This is really important. So when we're dealing with these negative, uncooperative, stupid, whatever I wrote down, people, have you noticed in the past, would it be fair to say that we might have found ourselves, I don't know, maybe a little stressed, maybe a little angry, maybe a little anxious, really got tired of dealing with them, got sick of dealing with them, frankly, got frustrated, certainly got confused because we have no clue why they're being so difficult. We just wanted to shut down and they drove us crazy. Now, here's the important thing about dealing with difficult people. They started it, right? Remember when you were a little kid? They started. Well, yeah, they did this, but then guess what? We did that. And when they did this and we did that, what do? That's right. They become even more difficult, which has us reacting and more difficult. And now we're in a whole different cycle, but it's a much more problematic cycle because there are two brain stems involved. We're in our brainstem, they're in their brainstem. We're basically banging brainstem trying to find out who's going to win, which means everybody loses, unfortunately. Plus, have you noticed how powerful it is when this continues? Because it's not like this just stops with this person. We take it in to the next conversation. It can ruin our day. It can ruin our week. That's why I love this quote that says, holding on to anger and resentment is like grasping a hot coal while blaming our misery on the person who started the fire. They started it. Yeah, but I'm the one that's now being affected by it, and it's affecting how I'm dealing with life because guess what? It's thrown me into this lower 20% of the brain. I'm no longer thinking on purpose. I'm no longer choosing my reactions and my words. I'm being driven and controlled by this person. So in order to deal with difficult people, we got to be clear about what part of the brain we're in. We got to be confident in our ability to do that, and we really got to be creative, because you never know what they're going to do. That's why I'm not going to give you a script where you say this and they say this and you say this and they say this, because they don't follow the script. Have you noticed that? You're not following the script, you know. Plus, if they think we're using a script, they get all difficult with us. So here's the thing we got to ask ourselves first. When I'm dealing with one of these difficult people, what is my purpose with them? When I'm dealing with someone who's stupid and unresponsive and all this stuff that I can't read, you know, difficult, what do we want them to do? Change, right? Stop being so difficult? So let me show you something about change. Everybody make a fist as tight as you can. Now, tighten to the point where it becomes uncomfortable. Now, if someone were to come along and try to force your fist open, what would be your initial response? Tighter. I call this the lesson of the fist. You can let go of your fist now. Here's what the lesson of the fist says. Whenever we try to force someone to change or make them change, they will either resist us or resent us or both, even if it hurts them. We think if you would just stop being so difficult, I can help you. But notice what I ask you to do. I ask you to make a fist. I ask you to tighten it down to where it's uncomfortable. And then I said, what would you do if someone came along and tried to force it open? You tighten it down even more, even though you're digging your fingernails into the palm of your hand, right? That's human nature. Whenever people feel that they're either being manipulated or sold or in some ways influenced in a way they don't want to be, they get resistant even if it hurts them. So we got to know when we're dealing with someone, what part of the brain are they coming from? Because here's what we need to know about people who are stuck in their brainstem. By the way, these are difficult people who are stuck in their brainstem. Anytime anyone is stuck in their brainstem, they will hear any suggestion that they change as criticism and will once again start defending it, almost start arguing for the very behavior you want them to change. So here is the key. We want to make sure we are dealing with these people on purpose. We're dealing with these people in a way that's effective, which means we can't make our purpose changing them first. They will see that as criticism, they will see that as manipulation, and they will resist. Kind of looks like this. Let's assume they're being, I don't know, demanding, offensive, unreasonable, rude, and maybe in the past we might have found ourselves getting a little frustrated, stressed, annoyed, anxious. Now remember, they see us as the difficult person. We see them as the difficult person. This is a good picture of two people trapped in that cycle, trapped in the brainstem. If you ever find yourself in this position again, because it's pretty normal. So if you ever find yourself in this position again, there is a brand new rule I want you to remember. I know it's brand new because I made it up. It's called the you stupid idiot rule. The you stupid idiot rule says this, that whenever you're talking to someone, you never want to talk to them in such a way where they could put you stupid idiot on the end of anything you say. Like, no, we can't do it that way. I've told you 5 times. I just don't know any other way of telling you. Or it's in the manual. Didn't you read the manual? Or with our kids, what were you thinking? How many times have we talked about this? You see, when we talk to people in such a way where they can put, you stupid idiot, on the end of anything we say, they will put it on there whether we say it or not. And once again, that fist will tighten down and they will become more resistant to our influence. So I've created a model that I call the 6 effective blocks. Six blocks and obstacles to effective communication and influence, and an antidote to each one. I want to go through the model, and then when I get through, I would like someone to play the role of a difficult person with me. I don't know, have you ever dealt with any difficult people with me? So think of one of those people that you want to kind of be more influential with in the future, and I'll show you how I would use this model to help them get from that brainstem to the neocortex, shift from the resistant brain to the receptive brain. All right, the first block to effective communication now we know is our state of mind. If we are angry or frustrated or hungry or tired, it is not the time to have that conversation. It blocks access to our interpersonal skills and our problem-solving skills. It throws us into that lower 20% of the brain. It leaks into our nonverbals, and we make the you stupid idiot mistake. When we speak from frustration or anger or annoyance, it comes across as if we're calling them a stupid idiot. We don't mean to, but that's how they interpret it. So the first thing we've got to be in dealing with people is very clear about our highest purpose. Got to be clear about the qualities and characteristics we want to bring to the conversation regardless of what they do. Bottom line, we've got to know what we want to bring out in them. So if you're going into a situation, always ask yourself the question, what do I want to bring to the situation and what do I want to bring out in them? Because if the next block is if we're trying to stop their negative behavior, if we're trying to stop them from being negative or superficial or stupid or any of this kind of stuff, they will hear that as criticism and once again start defending that process. So again, we've got to ask ourselves the question, if I'm going into a situation, what do I want to bring and what do I want to bring out? There's a quote that I love and I think it's really powerful for leaders. True vision is the ability to see in another more than they are showing you. Don't get fooled by their mask. This is a mask of fear and insecurity. They're afraid you don't like them. They're afraid you're not going to listen to them. They're afraid you're not going to value what they say. They're afraid you're going to fire them. They're afraid you're going to punish them. They're afraid you're going to shame them. They're afraid you're going to tell them they're wrong. They're afraid, they're afraid, they're afraid, they're afraid. If we can see difficult people as frightened versus frightening, or frightened versus difficult, it takes away a little of that power. I mean, if a little kid happened to burst into the room and looked at all of us and said, "You are all a bunch of horrible people," we wouldn't start like kicking him, go, "No, we're not, you're the horrible person." We'd go like, "Are you lost? Where's your mom? Where's your dad?" We would see his accusations. Calling us terrible names is not an information about us, but information about his fear. If you can see difficult people as frightened, most difficult people are frightened that there's something wrong with them, that people don't like them, because that's the message they're getting over and over and over. So they just expect that we're going to be the same way, and they come in kind of already ready to do battle. So what you don't want to do is get fooled by their mask. Ask yourself the question, have I ever seen this person come from the top of the mind? Have I ever seen them be curious or open-minded or helpful? If you have, that is what you want to bring out. But even if you've never seen that, you got to know that everybody on the planet has a brainstem and everybody on the planet has a neocortex. You want to get them up into that neocortex. In order to do that, you have to hold an image of who they are when they are there. This is how I work with people as a psychologist. I don't diagnose them with mental illnesses. I look for their strengths. Someone came to me suffering from OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, big time. She was putting up garbage bags in her shower, couldn't touch this, couldn't touch that. And she'd gone to doctor after doctor after doctor after doctor, and every one of them had given her a different medication, and she was taking all of them. So she came in just totally zombied out. And we talked for about 10 minutes, and about 10 minutes into the session, she smiled. And in my mind, I went, aha, that's the person I want to find. That's the person I want to strengthen. If you want to be influential with people, ask yourself the question, what are the qualities I want to bring out in this person? And hold that image of them in your mind. Because that will have them seeing you, not as someone who's trying to criticize them or shame them or change them, but someone who's trying to help and support them. Okay, so we got to know, what do I want to bring? We got to know, what do I want to bring out? The third block to effective communication is their worry, perspective, or concern. These people have a belief about something, and they think they are right about that. So let's assume that these two cups represent two people, us and them. And let's assume this represents the facts. Crystal clear. Everybody sees the facts the same way, right? No. Our limbic system colors how we see the facts. Some people see the facts one way. Other people see the facts another way. Same facts, different interpretation, different perspective. So this is our perspective. We have the pretty blue perspective because we're always right, right? And frankly, their perspective looks like piss. That's all there is to it. We got to be careful about thinking we're right and they're wrong, because guess what? They think yellow is wonderful. They think golden is wonderful and blue is kind of depressing. So if we try to tell them that yellow is wrong and blue is right, guess what they'll do? They'll argue for the veracity of yellow. We don't want them arguing for the veracity of yellow. We want them being able to be open to our influence. So I loved how Dean talked about this. Start by asking a question. Start by listening to what's going on and learning. Number one, what part of the brain are they coming from? If they're in the brainstem, don't try to give them data. Don't try to be rational with them. They're not in the part of the brain that can process that. What you want to find out is, what is their block or concern? What do they believe that's in the way of them hearing me? And the best way to find that out is to ask them. Help me understand what's important to you here. What do you want me to know about this? I mean, just think, when you were in an argument with someone in the past and someone stopped and said, okay, all right, okay, help me understand what's important to you. What do you want me to know? Can you see how that would change the dynamic of the discussion? So what it does when you do this, whoa, that's interesting. Good thing I deal with stress, isn't it? I tell you, that's good. Okay, so if you do this, you basically say, okay, help me understand what's important here. What do you want me to know about this? It actually changes the color of the conversation. You have now influenced them, so they see you not as someone who's trying to change them or convince them they're wrong, but someone who actually wants to understand what's going on. That allows us to deal with the second block, their fear that we don't get it. Anytime you're talking with someone and they have a belief or a concern or a fear that you don't understand, that you don't get it, then whatever you say makes no sense. It may be a wonderful solution, but if they believe you don't really understand their perspective on the problem, they can't hear your solution. So here is where you empathize. Now, this doesn't mean that you tell them you're sorry. This just means that you release them from the need to defend their perspective. Because remember, you just ask, hey, help me understand what's important to you here. They will almost always say, well, it's this and this and this. Now we have information we didn't have before. Now we don't just know what we know what we know and what they know. Who do you think is going to be now in the most powerful position to begin to blend these two? But here's the thing. We can't just hear it. We have to communicate that we get it. They have to know that we understand. So once you hear what's going on, what's important for you to do is say something like, you know, I can see how you'd see it that way. I can see how that would be important to you. Now here's what gets in the way of people being able to do this. They mix up understanding and agreement. They think they're the same thing. They're not. What's your name? Chad. So let's assume Chad and I are working together, and I told Chad, I don't know if you know it or not, but I really believe that Martians are controlling our brainwaves. Now, if Chad went, oh, Bill, give me a break, I would go, yes, they are, and I would defend my right to believe that Martians are controlling my brainwaves. But if Chad said, well, Bill, I can see how that would be important to you. I can see how you'd be concerned about that. It wouldn't mean that he thinks Martians are controlling my brainwaves, but now I'm going to be much more open to what Chad says next, because he has not made me defend the righteousness of my perspective. I was doing a Vistage talk to a group of CEOs at one point, and I had one CEO say, well, listen, shouldn't it just be a debate? You know, I give my rationale, they give their rationale, and whoever has the best rationale wins. Well, just think about a debate. When two people are debating, they're not trying to convince each other. They're trying to convince some third party, whether it's a jury or some panel or a judge. When two lawyers debate, they're not trying to convince the other lawyer. So a debate will not work because people are not trying to understand your perspective. They're trying to defend their own. So when you say, you know, I can see how you'd see it that way, what that does, you'll just see them relax just a little bit. The hands open just a little bit. Now they're going to be more open to what you say next. However, there is a magic word I want you to use. By the way, does anybody have a napkin? There's some actual water on my computer, and it's part of my brain is going, Bill, there's water on your computer. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. See, thank you. I feel so much better. Thank you, sir. I'll give you a goodie for that. Don't let me forget. Okay. All right. So here's the thing. There is a word that I want you to use. It's kind of a magic word. And what it'll do is allow you to move to the next step. Because a lot of people have learned that you're supposed to listen to someone. So they'll go, yeah, I hear what you're saying, but... That's like going up to a member of your family saying, you know, I really love you, but I really love you is out the window. This word will negate anything that comes before it. If I told you after the seminar, I was thinking of going up to the top of the hotel and jumping off, but I've changed my mind. See, that would make all kinds of sense. I've just negated something that needed to be negated. But when you say, I hear what you're saying, but they cannot hear what you have to say because you have negated what they have to say. So you just change this one word to, I hear what you're saying, and got some thoughts about that as well. Now they can hear what you have to say because you have not negated what they have to say. And Stephen Covey talks about the third alternative, which is a combination of what's important to you and what's important to them. Remember what Dean said, WIIFM, what's in it for me? In order for people to hear your solution is valuable, you have to know how it's valuable for them. Sometimes you won't know that until you find out what's important to them. Help me understand what's important to you here. What do you want me to know about this? That is the key to their cooperation. It's the key to resolving the conflict. Because if you have a solution that actually has something in it for them as well as you, that's the solution they're going to be able to hear. And it allows us to move to the fourth step, the fourth block, really, the tendency to focus on the problem in the past. This is especially true if you're someone in your family or your organization that's made a mistake. Like, let's assume someone in your organization has made a mistake and cost the company a lot of money. You kind of go, listen, you can't keep doing that. Do you know how much you cost the company? You stupid idiot. See how that works? Or with our kids, what were you thinking? How many times have we talked about that? So rather than focus on the problem in the past, I suggest we do this. We ask a neocortex question. If we want them to shift from the brainstem to the neocortex, we got to ask them a neocortex question. A neocortex question is almost always about the solution and the future, very rarely about the problem and the past. My favorite neocortex question that I use with my kids and my employees when they make a mistake, plus myself when I made a mistake, is, okay, knowing what you know now, how would you do that differently in the future? You'll be amazed at the wonderful responses you get out of that, because there's no shame in the future. There's no blame in the future. Now, a lot of us were raised with parents who loved us and wanted to teach us right from wrong. So when we made a mistake, they wanted us to feel really bad about that mistake so we wouldn't make that mistake again. But the problem is, in order to not make that mistake, we have to hang on to that bad feeling. That bad feeling is going to fade over time. And when we become teenagers, it goes away altogether. So we don't want kids having to hold on to their shame as a way of learning. Because we don't want kids to grow up feeling shamed. And frankly, there's only two responses to trying to make someone feel bad: blame or shame. Blame is fight, shame is flight. Well, Homer told me to. I didn't want to do it, but Homer told me to. Go talk to Homer if you really want. That's blame. That's what most people do, because they don't want to go to shame. But some people go, oh, God, you're right. I am so stupid. What was I thinking? But now they have to hold on to that shame, and it drives them into that lower part of the brain. The learning is in the upper 80% of the brain. We want them to take that learning and apply it to the future. I'll give you an example of how this worked in my family with my son, who's now 25. When he was 16, it was about 2:30 in the morning. My wife and I were asleep in our room at 2:30 in the morning. We thought Christopher was asleep in his room at 2:30 in the morning until we got a call from the police. We have your son handcuffed in the back of our police car. Would you like to come and get him? No. Right? I mean, that's the first thing that goes through your mind, right? But I resisted that because it was really unusual. Christopher had really not done this before, so it wasn't really like that. If this had been the fourth time or the third time or maybe even the second time, I might have said, nope, take him on downtown. Clearly he hadn't learned his lesson, but this was the first time. So I said, yeah, I'll come. So I got dressed, drove over there. Of course, here's the lights are bouncing off all the windows. Here's Christopher handcuffed in the back of the police car. I talked to the policeman. They let him go. He got into the car. Guess what the first thing he said to me was when he got in the car? What's your guess? No. 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 He said, no. He said, Dad, can we just talk about how I'm going to do this differently in the future? Now, wouldn't that be wonderful if every time your kids or your employees, every time they made a mistake, they came to you and they said, you know, I think I screwed up, but I've got an idea of how I'd love to do this in the future, and I'd love to run this by you. Oh, isn't that what we're going for? We're going from people learning from their mistakes. But we got to recognize what this does to people, because people have been so trained to be ashamed of this. Would it be fair to say this is a job description to be on the planet? Unless we're going to ascend anytime this afternoon, we're going to make some mistakes, right? So if we go, stupid, what was I thinking? There's that problem. But here's what I'm going to encourage you to do. A mistake is actually a mistake. It's an action that we took that missed. In the movies, when they make a mistake, what do? Retake it. And do you notice what everybody else is doing when the actor blows his lines? They're laughing. They're making light of it. Because if they went stupid, they'd never get past the first 2 or 3 takes. Sometimes they have to do this thing 24 times, 48 times, take 32 to get it right. So that's why people make light of it. Did you know that the original meaning of the word sin was an archery term? It meant to miss the mark. So if we're able to see our mistakes, actions that we took that missed, and go, okay, knowing what I know now, here's what I would do differently in the future, we're able to learn from our mistakes. We don't have to be ashamed of them. Good information. Take them into the future, and we can help other people learn from that as well. That is the example of one neocortex question. The last step in the model that we have to be careful of, and this is especially true for leaders in business, so you might find yourself in this position, is going to problem solving too soon. If you are a problem solver, you're probably ready to move to that solution. And if people are in that upper 80% of the brain, that's great. But if they're in that resistant blame or shame part and you go to problem solving too soon, they can't hear your solution even if it's a great solution. So here is the 6-step model. Number 1, we've got to be in the top of the mind. We've got to be very clear the qualities and characteristics that we want to bring to life. We've got to then make sure we are dealing with them in a way where we're not trying to stop their negative behavior. We're bringing out something in them. Got to know what that is. Got to be willing to listen and learn what part of the brain they're coming from, what is their concern, and have that be really valuable information. We don't have to agree with it. We've got to know what it is, because then we got to be able to say, you know, I can see how you'd see it that way. They relax, they let go. And now we can ask that neocortex question that helps them shift from the brainstem to the neocortex and go into problem solving with both of us in this upper 80% of the brain. Now, within the 6-step model, there's another model called the LEAP model, L-E-A-P. I call it the LEAP model because I think it's going to take a leap of faith for us to do this, because most of us didn't grow up this way. And then within the LEAP model, there is another model called the 4 whats. What part of the brain are they in? What is their concern? What about this can I understand? And what neocortex question will help them shift from the brainstem to the neocortex? Questions about this, or it's kind of Dean and Bill time, isn't it? Yeah. So we can do this if you want. We can bring Dean up, and then you can ask me questions or him questions if you like. Is Dean around? Did he leave? Yeah, no, oh, cool. Good. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay, good. Oh, good. Thank you so much.